The late night storm in your chest when you realize your life isn't yours anymore, it belongs to your choices. You stare at your reflection, and behind your eyes lives the truth. You weren't chasing money, you were chasing peace. They say money doesn't buy happiness, but for some people, it buys something that feels even more important: the illusion of control. The man who's always in debt doesn't start that way. He starts with dreams, with good intentions. He wants to be respected. He wants to feel capable. He wants to live a life that looks successful, even when he's drowning inside. And slowly, quietly, he builds a world made of numbers he can't catch up to. A world where he owes and owes and owes again. It starts small. Maybe it's a new phone, a little upgrade, something to feel current. Maybe it's a night out when he can't really afford it, but he tells himself he deserves it. Because he's been working hard, because life's been unfair, because one small break won't hurt, but it does. Because what begins as a reward turns into a cycle, a pattern that feeds on emptiness, on pressure, on comparison. Every debt is a promise he makes to his future self, hoping that version of him will figure it out. But the future never comes, because every time he tries to dig himself out, something deeper pulls him back. The quiet psychology of debt. It's not just numbers on paper. It's emotion disguised as finance. It's shame, guilt, hope, and denial, all dressed up as monthly payments. The man in debt doesn't only owe the bank. He owes the version of himself he pretends to be. The strong one, the responsible one, the son who says, "I've got it under control." But here's the truth nobody tells you. Debt has a smell. It lingers in your thoughts. It sits in your chest like humidity before a storm. You wake up already tired, already behind. Every day becomes a negotiation between what you need and what you owe. You start measuring time in bills. You count days by due dates. You work, but it feels like the work doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to your lenders, your past decisions, your mistakes. And yet, the strangest part is how easy it becomes to live like that, to normalize the weight, to convince yourself that everyone's in debt, that it's part of life. You scroll through social media and see people driving cars they can't afford, wearing watches they haven't paid off, and suddenly your chains don't feel like chains anymore. They feel like jewelry. That's the trick of modern life. It glamorizes debt until you forget it's destroying you. You see, the psychology of people who are always in debt is not about money. It's about identity. It's about who they believe they need to be in order to be accepted. A man will buy what he can't afford not because he needs it, but because he needs to feel enough. The new car isn't a vehicle, it's validation. The credit card isn't a tool, it's a mask. And with every swipe, he buys another layer of that mask, covering the fear that maybe, deep down, he's falling behind in life. But debt doesn't only take money, it takes freedom, it takes sleep, it takes dignity, it eats away at your ability to say no. Because when you owe too much, your choices stop belonging to you. You can't quit the job that drains you. You can't say no to the overtime that kills you. You can't rest because rest costs money. You become a worker for your past, not a builder of your future. And that's the cruelest part. Debt traps you in yesterday while pretending to help you reach tomorrow. Still, there's something darker. Some people don't just fall into debt. They need it. It becomes their rhythm, their comfort, their chaos. Debt becomes proof that they're still in the game, that they're still trying, still chasing something. They've tied their sense of worth to the struggle itself. Without it, they'd have to face the silence. The truth that maybe they don't know who they are when they're not chasing. So they keep borrowing, not just money, but time, peace, and energy. Every debt is a way to postpone reality. It's a quiet rebellion against limitation. I'll pay later, they say. But later never comes clean. Later arrives with interest, not just financial, but emotional. The interest of regret, of lost opportunities, of years spent running in circles, and soon debt stops being an accident. It becomes a lifestyle, a familiar pain you stop trying to cure. That's when the psychology shifts from survival to addiction. Debt becomes the drama they can't live without. It gives them something to talk about, something to fight against. It becomes the villain that makes them feel like the hero. But in the end, it's not a war, it's a slow surrender. Because every time they borrow to escape pain, they build another wall between themselves and the truth. The truth that maybe they don't need more things, they just need to feel whole. And so, the cycle keeps spinning. The same paycheck, the same promises, the same disappointment. The man tells himself next month will be better, but next month always looks like last month wearing new clothes. Because the problem isn't in the wallet, it's in the wound, and you can't pay off a wound with cash. There comes a point where debt stops being about money altogether. It becomes a mirror, one that shows you what you run from, what you fear, what you crave. People in debt often chase a feeling they once had, that rush of newness, that sense of being alive. The moment you buy something, your brain releases dopamine, a chemical that says you're winning. But the high fades fast, and when it does, you crave it again. You start chasing the purchase, not the possession. You buy things you don't need to fill emptiness you don't understand. And here's the truth, that emptiness doesn't come from being broke. It comes from being disconnected. Disconnected from purpose, from peace, from patience. Modern life has convinced us that faster is better, that more is success. We measure our worth in what we own instead of what we grow. We confuse appearance with achievement, and debt feeds that illusion perfectly. It gives you the appearance of progress while quietly stealing your future. Some men live their entire lives in that illusion. They work hard, they hustle, they look strong, but deep down, they're terrified. Terrified of being seen without the armor that debt buys them. Terrified of being ordinary. Because in a world where everyone's performing success, being real feels like failure. That's why some men stay in debt. It keeps the mask on. It keeps them feeling relevant even when it's killing them. But the mind of a man in debt is complicated. He hates what he owes, but he also fears who he'll be without it. Debt gives structure to his chaos. It keeps him busy, distracted, focused on fixing numbers instead of facing emotions. And that's the trap. When money problems become emotional comfort zones. It's easier to blame bills than to admit brokenness. You see, debt is just the physical proof of something deeper. Emotional debt, unpaid trauma, unhealed shame, a lifetime of feeling not enough. You can clear your credit, but you can't clear your soul unless you confront what created the need in the first place. That's why some people, even after paying everything off, find themselves back in the same hole. Because the hole wasn't in their bank account, it was in their heart. So how do you break that? You don't start with money, you start with meaning. You stop buying silence with stuff. You learn to sit in the discomfort of not having without making it a punishment. You stop trying to impress people who don't think about you after scrolling past your photo. You start respecting your future self enough to stop stealing from him. That's where the healing begins, when you realize that being debt-free isn't about money. It's about freedom from pretending. But for most men, that realization comes late, after too many nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how it got this bad. After too many apologies to people they love for mistakes they made trying to look successful. After too many moments of silence that money can't fill. That's when it hits them. Debt was never the enemy. The real enemy was the belief that they weren't enough without it. When that truth sinks in, something breaks, and something beautiful begins. You start wanting less, but appreciating more. You start chasing peace instead of purchases. You start seeing value in simplicity, strength in honesty, and pride in self-control. And slowly, the chains loosen. You stop measuring yourself by what you own and start defining yourself by what you can walk away from. The psychology of people who are always in debt is really the story of people searching for identity in the wrong places. They're not greedy, they're lost. They're trying to feel seen, loved, respected. But the world taught them that those feelings come with a price tag. So they keep paying with money, with time, with years. Until one day they realized that the only thing they can't afford anymore is pretending. And when that day comes, when they finally stop buying illusions, something changes in the air. The noise quiets down. The anxiety fades a little. They begin to see debt not as a curse, but as a teacher. One that forced them to face who they are when the shine wears off. And that lesson, as painful as it is, becomes the start of real freedom. Because in the end, debt is not about dollars. It's about desire. And until you understand your desires, you'll always owe something. To someone or to yourself. The day you stop running from that truth, you stop living in debt. Not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You stop owing the world an image and start giving yourself the truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real wealth looks like. Peace you don't have to finance, respect you don't have to buy, and a life that doesn't depend on pretending you have more than you do. That's the psychology behind people who are always in debt. Not greed, not laziness, just the silent war between who they are and who they think they have to be. And the moment they stop fighting that war, they win. Not the lottery, not a raise. But something far more valuable, the right to finally breathe without owing anyone for the air. The world makes it so easy to fall. It tells you to keep up, to impress, to never look like you're losing. You see people smiling online, holding things you can't afford, living lives you don't even want, and still you try to match them. Because it's not about needing what they have. It's about not wanting to feel less than they are. And that's how debt begins. Not in the wallet, but in the mind. But there's a point where something in you breaks. Not out of defeat, but out of awakening. You start to see the truth hidden under all that noise. You realize that being in debt doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. It shows you where you've been lied to, what you've believed, and how far you've gone to fill a hole that was never meant to be filled with things. You start to understand that the real wealth isn't having more, it's needing less. And when that hits you, it's quiet. No fireworks, no grand speech, just a deep breath that finally feels real. You begin to walk differently. You start saying no to things, to people, to pressure. You start protecting your peace like it's gold, because it is. You stop living for the image and start living for the man behind it. Debt loses its power the moment you stop giving it meaning. The moment you decide that your worth isn't measured by what you owe or own, but by how honest you can be with yourself. That's the real victory. That's the kind of freedom no bank can take, no number can define, because in the end, peace is the only thing worth paying for, and it's bought with truth, not money.